go.
Sports and Culture 001. What tennis taught me about the importance of taking care of your equipment. 1. Prologue. As a translator by profession, I spend most of my time at a desk, at the mercy of my computer. For years I was out of exercise, and that lifestyle took a toll on my body. I developed chronic back problems and had trouble sitting down for a prolonged period of time. Not content to be desk-ridden for the rest of my days, around 4 years ago I took up tennis. As a native Californian, recreational sports have in one way or another been a part of my life since I was a kid. In my case, football, baseball, basketball, and skateboarding. But tennis was the first sport I truly threw myself into. Under the advice of Big Brother, who explained to me that tennis was a sport where the fundamentals were especially important, I decided to get myself a private coach from day one. The first thing tennis taught me was the importance of the gear you choose, and how well you take care of said gear. In my estimation, that's one thing that sets it apart from sports like basketball or soccer, where all you need to get started is a ball sufficiently filled with air. For our lessons, we'll rent a public court. When practicing alone, I would go to the famed tennis practice wall adjacent to the Tokyo Metropolitan Gymnasium, near the National Stadium in Sendagaya. Unfortunately, this wall has been closed down as of the end of March 2018 due to construction on facilities for the 2020 Tokyo Olympics. 2. My first tennis racket. Wilson 6-1, Torna grip over grip, Wilson NXT 17. The first task was to get myself a racket. Initially, I thought a beginner's racket would be the way to go. I consulted Big Brother, who told me that if I was serious about tennis, I would be better served starting with a heavier racket meant for intermediate and advanced players. The idea was that the racket itself would teach me. Although I was out of shape, the size of my frame meant that physical strength and arm power would not be limiting factors, so I opted for a 340-gram racket, that is, specifically one with US specs. I had the racket, which has a tight 18x20 string pattern, strung with Wilson NXT 17 multifilament strings at 45 pounds. And as for my overgrip, I sweat quite a bit from my hands, so I went with Torna grip. It's a favorite of the pros, and I'd also found myself oddly calmed by the sight of the French player Richard Gasquet re-gripping his racket during changeovers. In the beginning, I was using my arm alone to hit the ball, from backswing to follow-through. My coach had to repeatedly remind me to use the weight of the racket itself and a proper unit turn to execute my ground strokes. The concept took a while for me to grasp. 3. From beginner to intermediate. Wilson Pro Staff 90. Technifiber X1 Biphase. Technifiber Duramix HD. About 2 years in, my ground strokes finally became passably reliable, and I got myself a Wilson Pro Staff 90. This racket was developed for Roger Federer, but he ended up barely using it in match play. And perhaps that isn't surprising. It has an unforgivingly small 90 square inch racket head. But when you make contact with the sweet spot, the feeling is absolutely sublime. I had it strung with Technifiber X1 Biphase 1.24mm on the mains, and Technifiber Duramix HD 1.25mm on the crosses, both at 45 pounds. The Duramix HD string is difficult to obtain outside of Japan. I kept the tension of my strings low in order to teach myself by feel how to meet the ball with the sweet spot and how to crush the ball. 4. My first time buying two of the same racket. Wilson Pro Staff RF97 Autograph, Luxilon Alu Power, Technifiber Black Code, Technifiber Red Code, Golsen Polybreak 18, Golsen AK Pro CX 17. About a year ago, once I'd gotten a feel for crushing the ball and driving through my strokes, I bought a pair of Wilson Pro Staff RF97 Autographs, 340 grams, 16x18, Roger Federer's signature racket. I'd been trying a number of hybrid string setups, using mostly polys like Luxilon Alu Power, also used by Federer and other players like Novak Djokovic in their hybrid setups. Technifiber Black Code, 1.18mm, and Red Code, 1.20mm. The latter is used by the American player John Isner, who recently won the Miami Open, his first ATP Masters 1000 title. Right now I'm using two Gosen strings, the Polybreak 18, which is hard to obtain in Japan, and a multifilament called AK Pro CX17, both at 47 pounds. I'm still experimenting, so I have the mains and crosses reversed between my rackets, and I mostly use one or the other depending on the weather or how I'm feeling physically. 5. A racket for doubles play. Yonex V-Core Dual G97, Yonex Polytour Fire, Wilson Premium Leather Grip, Babolat RPM Blast, Luxilon Grip Elite Dry, Kimoni Quake Buster. Recently I've been playing more and more doubles, so I have two Yonex V-Core Dual G97s, 330 grams. The racket endorsed by the Swiss player Stan Wawrinka. Here in Japan, the heavier version of the racket weighs in at just 310 grams, which is a little too light for my liking, so I purchased two 330-gram rackets on a recent trip back home to California. I re-gripped both with the Wilson Premium Leather Replacement grips, so they currently weigh in at about 340 grams each. As for the strings, I have one strung with Babolat RPM Blast, 1.20 millimeters, at 47 pounds, and the other with Yonex Polytour Fire, 1.20 millimeters, also at 47 pounds. The former is the string of choice for both Wawrinka himself and the Spanish player Rafael Nadal, and the latter is used by the German player Angelique Kerber. For these two rackets I used gray Luxilon Elite Dry overgrips, which just came out in 2017, and have quickly become a favorite of mine. I bought a 30-pack on my California visit. The vibration dampener I use is the Kimoni Quake Buster, which is a favorite of Japanese player Nishikori Kei. It's available in a variety of colors, so I like to match them up with whatever strings I have on the racket. 6. Shoes. A6 shoes for hard court and omni-court. When it comes to shoes, I've tried them all: Nike, Adidas, New Balance, Mizuno, etc. But the shape of my foot is a bit wide, like a lot of Japanese, so I found that A6 is the best fit for me. In the US, hard courts are the norm, so I was taken aback when I first walked onto an omni-court surface, sand-filled synthetic grass. On hard courts I wear A6 Gel Resolution 6, and on omni-courts I wear Gel Resolution 6 OC. A6 shoes fit wonderfully and offer great stability, and since footwork is one of my strengths, it's important that I can trust my shoes to never fail me. 7. Epilogue. Whenever we're out on a walk and we see someone with a solitary racket handle sticking out of their backpack, Big Brother will wonder aloud, I don't understand why they only carry around one racket. If their gut were to break, Big Brother calls strings gut, a term that has stuck around since the days when natural gut, strings made of animal intestines, were the only strings available. They're automatically done for the day. Something else he'll say is, recreational players always use white overgrips because they see the pros using them on TV. But most toshiros, toshiro is an argot word Big Brother uses for shirouto, which means novice or amateur. You'll see them with the dirty, worn overgrip that they'll use for as long as possible. His advice to me? Don't expect to become any good if you aren't making it a point to keep your gut and your overgrips in good condition. Replacing them is necessary. Sports and Culture 001. What tennis taught me about the importance of taking care of your equipment. www.digtokyo.jp